The Nintendo Switch is filled with hidden gems, and CyberConnect 2 created what is in my opinion one of its best in FUGA Melodies of Steel. The Japanese team, headed up by Hiroshi Matsuyama, combined elements from games like Advance Wars but also JRPGs to create something that felt truly unique. And I think that you will love the sequel if you like that game, but does it hit all the right notes? Well, thanks to the developer for the review copy. Now let's find out. If you're unfamiliar with the events of the first game, a group of orphans fight back against their oppressors, the Burman Empire, and to do that they use a large mechanized tank, which has to it more than meets the eye. Now, I don't want to spoil that story in case you want to go back and play it, as it's usually on sale and it's well worth it. But in the sequel, we join the same children. All is well until they're called back to the new capital city. The tank that they once used has been reconstructed, but no one can get inside. As expected, when they arrive, it opens up, but something goes awry and it swallows a few of the children and sets off on a rampage of destruction. The rest of them quickly set out to chase it using an old Burman tank, the Tarascus, which featured in the first game. Now, I really like the story this time round, as I did the first, but because I have more of an affinity with these characters, I was more driven to trying to rescue them. The writing's as strong as it was in the first, and there are some really poignant moments. What that game did so well was to make life and death a real consequence based on the actions that you chose. Specifically, it formed one of the mechanics, with the powerful super weapon literally killing the crew member. They've changed that slightly this time round, as we'll talk about in a minute. Now, as far as gameplay goes, conveniently, this new tank has a very similar layout to the old one, and also gameplay will feel very familiar. You can take control of any of your crew members, move around its interior, build up the relationships between them, which in turn increases affinities, giving ability boosts, as well as a mood boost if you complete the tasks that they want you to. These are all shown within this menu, and yeah, they might be a glorified way of getting you to experience all the mechanics in the game, but they really can mean the difference when you're fighting a tough enemy. It's not just ability boosts, it's also skill unlocks, and by building up those relationships when it comes to combat, pairing up individuals with a high affinity allows for different trigger boost and link effects. These could be unique skills that only those two can do together at a set time. The determining factor to how much you can level up or upgrade the systems inside your tank remains unchanged in AP, and with every action this drops until it reaches 0, and then it's time to go out into combat. As before, your route will take you down several avenues, and you can choose whether you go for the normal or easier option. The normal routes will provide you with more experience as well as reward, but obviously provide a tougher challenge. You can slightly speed up the trundling movement of your tank here by holding down a trigger, and combat instances will show you exactly how many waves you'll have to fight. This is where its Advance Wars inspiration comes into play. Combat is excellent. Your tank has 3 different gun positions, and within each you'll have 2 of your children. The children's weapons are split into 3 different types, and these are demarcated with different colours. The machine guns in blue, excellent for taking out aerial vehicles, the yellow intermediate, and the red heavy cannon. The enemies that you will face will have weaknesses to different ones of those. Hitting them with the right one will cause them to stagger back, meaning their attacks will be pushed right to the back of the line, which can be seen at the top of the screen. Again, similar to the first game. And while you were building up all those relationships, you would have been improving the mood of your crew members. And as you deal or take damage, this will improve further to the point where it reaches its peak. At that time, all their hits will do critical damage, and it's a very important mechanic and worth paying attention to. Now, unlike before, we don't have a cannon that kills our crew. Let's be honest, no one was really going to use that, not if they didn't have to. This time around, you've got the Managarm. It's very similar to that Soul Cannon, but it will knock out the crew member. The kicker this time is that you won't gain any XP, so that is a big no from me. However, I guess if you're facing a very difficult fight, at least you know there's a chance for victory, albeit at the cost of all your experience. On that subject, death doesn't come without its own costs. Through the help of a mysterious stranger, you can go back in time, from the beginning of the last intermission or after it, to try and retry and improve upon your first failed effort. This time around, there seems to be a clearer system for determining the type of leader that you want to be. It's called the Empathy and Resolution system, and has you responding to different dialogue choices in a series of different ways that reflect either an empathetic response or one that's more determined and resolute. This was good, as it gave a little more context and meaning to some of the dialogues that you took part in within towns. It kind of reminded me of Knights of the Old Republic's light and dark side. However, here there was no clear right or wrong, but these choices will still affect the outcome of the game. More than that though, putting points into these areas gradually gets you leadership skills. These can be game-changing abilities that randomly occur. Things like having your units start before the enemy. In my opinion, anything that adds a little more weight to the decisions you make is a good thing, and it's a prime example of how FUGA 2 improves over its predecessor. With that said, it's still quite linear. I would have loved to have seen more options for branching paths on the world map. It's something I think would add real replayability to the game. The towns and cities you visit provide gear and items, chances to talk to the locals, but act as little more than predefined stopping points before you continue with your adventure. Other minor niggles include the way that you have to check on the affinities between your crew members. I think they could do a lot to streamline this system. I said it in the first game, and it remains relatively the same. You have to go through menus and have a look to see what affinity they're currently at, then change your character accordingly, try and build up the relationships. It's really not a huge issue, but I do think streamlining would help quite a bit. There's no real way to grind. Now, that might be a good thing for most of us, but there will be the occasional spike in difficulty where the ability to go off and grind would maybe help. At the end of your run, when you've completed the game, there is the option for New Game Plus though, and despite those couple of gripes, it's such a fun game. For me, story and gameplay combined score 18 out of 20, that's 1 point higher than the first game, and the controls score 17 out of 20, that's exactly the same for the same reason. I think it would have benefited from some touchscreen controls. Running on the Unreal 4 engine, FUGA 2 bears a striking similarity to the first game. That's not necessarily a negative though. There are some new locations here, new enemies, but perhaps a couple of lazier moments like the interior of your vehicle looking almost identical to the first time round, and obviously certain assets have been recycled. Performance is rock solid across the board in both docked and handheld modes, and I have to reiterate that I would have loved some touchscreen controls here. It's not a deal breaker though, is it really? And I'm really impressed with things like the load times and just how snappy the animations are. I do enjoy this art style, with elements of 2D and 3D combined, and great use of contrast and colour. The soundtrack is once again spot on. And the voice actors do a good enough job. You'll find Japanese and French, but no English dub. I give the visuals and performance 17 out of 20. I think they could have put in a little more effort into changing things from the first game, but sound and audio in my opinion are slightly better. They score 17 out of 20 as well. FUGA 2 will set you back £35.99 or your regional equivalent, and there is a deluxe edition which is £53.99, with the whole thing fitting into around about 4 gigs. It's a similar length to the first title. You could complete the main story in around about 20 to 25 hours, but realistically you're going to want to take this at a slightly slower pace and see everything that's on offer. Then you've got the New Game Plus mode as well, so you'd be moving more towards 40 hours plus. It's time well spent in a world that's enjoyable, and I do so hope this one doesn't get overlooked by most players. For me, value scores are very well deserved, 18 out of 20. FUGA Melodies of Steel 2, for me, is a refined improvement on almost everything that made the first game great. It gets a SwitchUp score of 87%. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope, like me, you kind of wanted to know about it. And yeah, it's definitely worth adding to your collection. A big thanks once again to the publisher for providing a review copy, and to all of you that enjoy the content. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys.
See ya!